The reservation was for 7. She arrived at 7:12, which used to be nothing. Now it felt like a signal. He stood when she walked in, old habit, muscle memory, and she smiled at that. Not warmly, appreciatively, the way you smile at something that still works. They ordered wine. She talked about her sister's renovation. He asked follow-up questions. He always asked follow-up questions. That was one of the things she used to love, and one of the things that had quietly started to feel like being interviewed. Halfway through the entree, she set her fork down. Not dramatically, just down. "I think I need something different," she said. He looked at her, not with anger, not with confusion, just that steady, measured look that had gotten him through 30 years of business and 2 corporate restructurings. His hands stayed flat on the table. His breathing didn't change visibly, but something behind his eyes shifted, the way a house settles in cold weather, imperceptible to most, familiar to anyone who's lived in it. The table beside them had gone quiet, a couple in their 40s. The woman had glanced over. The man was looking at his plate. He didn't argue. He didn't ask her to define different. He just nodded once, slowly, and reached for his wine. She had expected more resistance. She had, in some part of herself she hadn't examined clearly, wanted it. What she got instead was composure, and composure, in that moment, read as indifference, which is what she would tell her friends later. He didn't even fight for us. He paid the bill. He walked her to her car. He drove home alone, past the same roads he'd taken for 22 years, and he sat in his kitchen for a long time in the dark. There's something most men miss in that moment. And there's something most women don't see until much later. She wasn't leaving him. Not exactly. This is the part that takes time to understand for both people. She was leaving a feeling, or rather the absence of one. She had confused stability with stagnation and predictability with invisibility. These are not the same thing, but they can look identical from the inside of a long relationship when you're not examining them carefully. Women who leave stable men over 60 are rarely leaving cruelty. They're rarely leaving neglect in any clinical sense. What they describe, when they're being precise about it, is a kind of emotional flatness, a sense that the man beside them had arrived, had reached his destination, and stopped being a person who was still in motion. That perception may be accurate. It may also be a projection. The psychology underneath is worth sitting with. After years of raising children, building careers, managing households, many women in their late 50s arrive at a strange intersection. Their children are gone, their professional identity is shifting, and they find themselves looking at the man across the table, asking quietly, sometimes unconsciously, "Is this still a story? Or have we reached the last page?" The stable man, for his part, often reads this as ingratitude. He's provided, he's shown up, he's weathered things that would have broken less disciplined men. And now, in what should be a period of earned calm, he's being told that the calm itself is the problem. Both of these things can be true simultaneously. That's the part the arguments miss. But here's where the hidden psychology becomes important. Not as a weapon, but as honest accounting. The moment she said, "I need something different," she was not evaluating him. She was evaluating herself. She was asking what she still wanted from the years she had left. And the answer she arrived at, rightly or wrongly, was something that makes me feel alive. What she hadn't yet calculated was the cost of finding out whether that feeling existed anywhere else, or whether it had always required cultivation where she stood. This is where the narrative gets complicated, and where most conversations about this subject lose their honesty. There's a version of this story that men tell each other over drinks, the version where she leaves, discovers it was a mistake, and comes back humbled. It's satisfying. It's also, in a meaningful number of cases, not what happens. Some women leave and find genuine renewal. They travel. They reconnect with parts of themselves that had been compressed for decades. They build friendships that feel like oxygen. They date men who are different, more volatile, more surprising. And for a stretch of time, the aliveness they were looking for shows up. That is real. Dismissing it entirely is dishonest. But the first year has a particular shape regardless of outcome. The early months carry a specific kind of energy, part grief, part adrenaline. She's making decisions for herself alone. She's rediscovering small freedoms. The silence in her apartment is chosen silence, which feels different from the silence that accumulated in the marriage. She's not wrong to feel this. Freedom chosen is not the same as freedom suffered. What shifts, typically somewhere between month 4 and month 10, is the social landscape. The couple she knew begin to reconfigure around her absence. Invitations taper. Friendships that were partly structural, organized around shared domesticity, reveal themselves as exactly that. The social architecture that looked like it belonged to her turns out to have been load-bearing in ways she hadn't noticed. This isn't punishment, it's physics. Social networks built over decades around a partnership have a center of gravity. When one partner exits, the center doesn't follow them. And dating, if she pursues it, introduces its own arithmetic. Men her age who are emotionally available and self-possessed are not, as it turns out, an abundant resource. The men who present as exciting are frequently exciting for the same reasons they've never sustained anything. The ones who are available quickly become so because they need someone to manage them. This is not universal, but it is common enough to be worth naming. None of this proves she made the wrong decision. Some women navigate all of it and arrive somewhere genuinely better. But the arrival takes longer and costs more than the initial departure imagined. Here is where strategy enters. Not strategy in the small reactive sense, not how do I get her back or how do I make her regret it. Those are the wrong frames entirely. They're built around her decision rather than his trajectory. The question a man at 60 or 65 should be asking is significantly larger. What does the next chapter of my life actually look like? And what kind of man do I intend to become in it? There's a version of grief that men this age enter that looks like Stoicism but functions as paralysis. He keeps the same routines. He sees the same people. He tells himself he's fine. He's not fine. He's just performed his way through similar pain before and knows how to make it look like composure. But performing composure and actually inhabiting it are different skills, and one doesn't automatically lead to the other. The men who navigate this most effectively, not most quickly, but most effectively, tend to do 3 things with some deliberateness. The first is that they allow themselves a private reckoning. Not public processing, not oversharing with children or mutual friends, but an honest internal audit. What was I not giving? What had I stopped initiating? Not physically, but emotionally. When did I last surprise her? When did I last surprise myself? This isn't self-blame. It's the kind of accounting that produces usable information rather than recycled resentment. The second is that they invest in growth that is genuinely theirs. Not performative change designed to attract her attention, but actual expansion. A course of study, a physical challenge, a creative discipline, a relationship with younger colleagues or mentors that pulls them forward into something new. A man who is genuinely becoming something is recognizably different from a man who is pretending to. The third, and perhaps least intuitive, is that they re-examine their relationship with solitude. Men in their 60s who have spent decades defined by partnership often have no real relationship with being alone. They've been surrounded by family, by work structure, by social expectation. Solitude, when it arrives, feels like punishment. Learning to inhabit it without filling every hour is not a small adjustment, but it's one that separates men who recover their authority from men who scramble to replace what they lost before they understand it. None of this is a formula. Context matters enormously. A man with strong friendships navigates this differently than one whose social world was entirely mediated through the marriage. A man with defined purpose outside the relationship has different raw material than one who made her the center of everything. These distinctions matter. Treating all situations identically is a failure of calibration. 2 years later, sometimes 3, there's a conversation that happens in different kitchens, different cities, that follows a recognizable pattern. She's talking to someone she trusts, and she says something like, "I don't regret leaving, but I didn't understand what I was leaving until I left it." She's not saying she was wrong. She may not be wrong. What she's describing is the gap between what she imagined she was escaping and what she actually lost. Stability, it turns out, isn't just a feeling, it's a structure. And structures become visible primarily at the moment they're removed. The things she had attributed to his limitations, his predictability, his emotional steadiness, his refusal to perform drama, look different in retrospect. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse, but differently, with more information. What she couldn't see from inside the relationship was that what felt like flatness was, in part, the shape of sustained commitment. That what felt like invisibility was sometimes just the absence of friction. That a man who doesn't perform his love loudly is not necessarily a man who doesn't feel it. And he, sitting in his kitchen or on his porch or in whatever room became his after everything divided, is living a different version of the same education. He's learning which parts of himself he had outsourced to the marriage, his social warmth, his sense of being known, the small daily witness of being with someone who remembered the same things he did. He's also discovering, if he's honest, which parts of himself had gone quiet, what he stopped offering. When the relationship became maintenance rather than creation, these are not comfortable things to see, but they are useful things to see. The question worth sitting with, not answering immediately, but sitting with, is this. What does it mean to be a complete person rather than half of a partnership? Because the answer to that question is what determines everything that comes next. The quality of any future relationship, the quality of his solitude, the legacy he's building in the years he has left. Not in the financial sense, though that matters, but in the human sense. What do the people who know him carry forward? What is the atmosphere in the room when he enters it? A man who has genuinely done this work, not performed it, not used it as leverage, but actually done it, changes in a way that is visible without being announced. He becomes more interesting, not because he's trying to be, but because he's stopped trying to maintain the appearance of already having arrived. That is a different man than the one who sat at that restaurant table. Not a lesser man, not a bitter man. A man who has been through something real and emerged from it with more dimension than he entered with. She may see that, she may not. That's no longer the primary variable. The primary variable is what he does with the rest of the time he has, and whether the life he builds from here is one he chose or simply the one that was left when everything else was taken away. There's a significant difference between those two things. And any man over 60 who has earned the composure he carries, who has survived enough to know the difference between pain and catastrophe, already knows which one he intends to live.